Welcome to another video update, and I'm here joined by Strumer Law's Chris Pezalla. Hey, Chris, how you doing today?
Hey, Carl, how are you doing?
Wonderful. Today we're going to talk about the Aviation Safety Reporting Program and what you can do with it, what it is, and what are the advantages, and some of the pitfalls that you might find out. But before we get started, just a couple of things here. I know a lot of people have been asking about our scholarships guide, if they can give them as a gift. It's real simple. Go to the website, aviationcareerspodcast.com, and click on gift, and you can figure out how to give the scholarship guide as a gift. It's really that simple. And or just send us email, feedback at aviationcareerspodcast.com. As a matter of fact, that's where you can contact us. Also, if you're watching this from Stuck My Gavcast, contact at stuckmygavcast.com. Anyway, let's start here. Aviation Safety Reporting Program. What is it, and why do we use it? We have again with us Chris Pezalla from Strumer Law. So, Chris, what is the Aviation Safety Reporting System or Aviation Safety Reporting Program?
Well, certainly, Carl. This is a program that many pilots today are familiar with. It started in 1975, and for the FAA, it's largely a data acquisition program. The FAA is looking for information that could tell them about trends in aviation, whether they're seeing a certain type of component that's having failures or a certain type of situation that maybe is leading to more pilot error or other occurrences. And data helps to make decisions. For instance, several years ago, the FAA started a program to realign taxiways and make them more squared off because they discovered that the non-square taxiways were causing more pilot deviations and were more likely to cause a runway incursion. And so programs like this one help to collect that information. But the important part of the program is that it's the pilots as well as dispatchers and controllers through their own mechanisms that bring in this information.
So I think I was, many people, and I was at first under the impression it was only for pilots. So the safety reporting is for all different aspects of aviation.
It is. Everybody can participate in this program.
Interesting. So most of our listeners right now are pilots. So let's talk a little bit towards that. So how does this aviation safety reporting system actually benefit us as pilots?
So as a pilot, there's two benefits. The indirect benefit, of course, is that the more data we collect, the safer we're going to be in aviation going forward. More specifically, and this is what we talk about a lot on the legal side, is going to be the benefits in terms of an enforcement action. So the Air Safety Report, a lot of folks know this as a NASA form or a NASA report. And I'm going to speak to that just briefly, which is even though this is an FAA program, it's administered by NASA. NASA administers it in order to help separate this from the FAA, help to make it an anonymous program so that the FAA is not just taking your report and then filing a violation against a pilot. So with this program, once a pilot or another individual files a report, as long as it follows the conditions and guidelines, it will protect the pilot against an enforcement action. It's not 100%, but it is very effective. The FAA generally does not prosecute individuals who have had an inadvertent occurrence and have taken the time to report it to the system.
So that's a really good understanding of this program. I love how you put that. So it's the FAA who put the program together, but it's NASA that's actually administering that program. So it's a third party, and I think that's great to have that third party that's just strictly looking at the data and reporting it.
That's correct. And so once that data is reported, we used to do this in a paper form, an actual physical paper, and you'd write out the form and mail it in. And you would rip off the top copy with a serial number, and that was the only way to identify your report, and you'd be the only one who had it. We do that same process today, but we do it digitally through the website. So NASA looks at this information, they evaluate it. If there is a criminal action, they do have to report that to the authorities. But if it's just aviation and it's inadvertent, they will not tell the FAA who you are. What they will do is they'll do their best to take out any identifying information, and they will pass that report without your name to the FAA so that the FAA can go back and address whatever the issue is.
So, Chris, as far as the length of time to file a report, how much time does someone have to actually put these reports into the system? Or if they just noticed that they had a violation, it's 2 weeks later.
Right. So the normal timeline is the 10 days, 10 days from the occurrence. That assumes that you know that something happened. So if you know you busted airspace or there was another event, go ahead and file a report within 10 days. That being said, sometimes we don't find out. Sometimes we don't discover until the pilot's gotten a letter from the FAA saying, hey, there is an issue here. And there have been cases where somebody's flown an airplane that was maybe deficient. They didn't even know it. The FAA inspects a logbook or an airworthiness certificate later and starts trying to track back who flew it. And in those cases, we say it's 10 days from the time of notice. So in other words, you got a letter today. This is the first honest moment that you know there's an issue. Go ahead and file the report at that point in time. It's going to be 10 days. That being said, if you think something happened, don't wait for somebody to tell you. If you already have an idea that something may have been an issue, go ahead and file the report. But if you truly don't know and you get that letter, go ahead and file within 10 days. That's generally going to be acceptable.
I know from my experience, they've been really good with this. I've had the FAA contact me and say, hey, there's been a possible violation or incident that you may have been involved with. Could you file a report? Sure, I'll go ahead and do that. And nothing came about from it. They just wanted to have a report filed. So they're pretty lenient from what I could tell. The FAA, I don't know what your experience has been.
It has been. They're very true to the program. As long as you're making an effort to stick with the program and report the things that occur and to not intentionally cause these violations, they're generally going to accept the reports that go into the system.
In general, you would think it's always a good idea to file a safety report. Is there any instance where you wouldn't file one?
There are a few. First of all, criminal activity is not covered by the program. If you report an illegal action, you're running drugs on the plane, you're providing charter when you're not certified to do so, those will be referred out and those will have your name on them. So if what you did was intentionally illegal, not just that you busted airspace, but you intentionally did something illegal, or if the violation was intentional, you intentionally violated airspace and it wasn't an emergency, those would be cases you do not want to put that information in, because if it's intentional, it's not covered by the program, and now you're revealing. So if you've done something intentionally, it's a good time to get an attorney and let us work through that as opposed to putting that into the safety program.
So so there's two things there. Number one, if you intentionally violate an FAR, which there is a reason you would intentionally violate an FAR, in an emergency is a good idea. And an emergency can be many things, trying to avoid an aircraft and you violate airspace, that type of thing. That's when you want to file that report. But I think the one thing that we're talking about more so is intentional, like, for instance, say you're overweight, causes an accident. The reason you're overweight is because your plane was filled up with drugs. That would be something that would not be protected, I'm assuming, through the safety program.
That would not, correct. That would not be covered by the safety program. If you have an accident, maybe not with the drugs, but it's a gray area, for instance, in the news, there was a reveal party for a child's gender. They had a agricultural airplane. The accident, I think it injured one of the two people on board, which is really interesting because it was a single-seat airplane.
Oops.
So we had a violation which may have contributed to the accident. In that particular instance, again, you're going to want to get an attorney for that because that's going to involve a lot of litigation possibly. In that scenario, I might still tell the client to go and file the report, but I would want them to call me as an attorney first before we went in and did that.
So in general, let's back up here. We've had an issue. We've had an accident, incident, or a possible violation. We're not sure if there's a violation. Two things. Number one, if nobody's seen it, we go ahead and we file it, and we do this online. But number two, what if someone comes to us? That's the more important one. If I'm approached by an authority, it might be law enforcement, it might be the FAA, it could be any federal agency, then what do I do?
So before I answer that, I just want to caveat with the aircraft accident, that information can be used. That information is not protected, but we still recommend in an accident that doesn't involve a violation, an intentional violation, we still at our law firm usually recommend filing that. But I just want to make clear that if you do have an accident, just filing this report isn't enough. You need to do the other reporting. And also the information you put in the report in that situation could be used in an FAA investigation. So if you've been in an accident, it's going to be better to, or anything where an aircraft's been damaged, someone's been hurt, it's better to call the attorney first with those. So as to, but beyond that, if you've been approached, you can absolutely file one of these. So if a controller gives you a phone number, if the FAA has sent you a letter of investigation, those would be times that you could go ahead and fill out one of these reports. Or if you notice a potential violation yourself, maybe you clipped an airspace, you didn't make contact with air traffic control, you don't know if there's an issue, go ahead and file it.
It seems to me that the majority of the filings are people that file because they may have violated a regulation. And I don't know the stats on that. I'd have to look it up, but I was wondering, do you know if that's true or not?
Well, we always say may because we don't know until there's been an investigation whether or not there really was a violation. If you've ever gotten one of those scary FAA investigation letters, you know, they use a lot of language like may have been a violation, may have occurred. Most of the folks, usually people that are filing these, are on some kind of a notice that something happened. The controller advised them that there was a mistake, or somebody else has said something. So usually that's what prompts it. But there's no reason you have to wait for that prompt. If you had an altitude violation or something else, or you think you may have, and it's okay to say it may have happened, because if it didn't, nobody's going to chase you down. But it's better to put that in that this may have happened, and then if the FAA comes back later, you pull out your receipt, which is now on digital, and you give them the number and say, "Look, I filed this report."
So there are some people that you talk to that'll say, "I'm not going to file a report because I don't want to get in trouble." That is not very good logic, I find. You really should file a report, barring anything illegal like we talked about. If you think you may have had an issue, they can't use that against you, right?
Right. So as long as it falls within the program, it's not intentional, it's not illegal. In that circumstance, then generally they will not come after you. And also NASA's not going to turn over your identity to the FAA. So this is often referred to as the sole source reporting. If you're the only one that reported an inadvertent mistake, then they will not generally pursue that matter. Now, if you file a report and then say an air traffic controller files a report, okay, now they are going to investigate. But you're still better off because you've now filed this report, and you can go back to the FAA and say, no, I told you this happened. Look, it's right here in the paperwork.
That makes sense. And one of the other things, too, is when we go about filing this, there's a process. I think a lot of people ask me, is there only one way to file, or are there multiple ways to file?
So I'm not sure how much gets done in the paper form anymore. This is primarily done through the website. Those folks that work for air carriers have a related program that goes ahead and does this as part of that program. But for the general aviation, I just go through the website, and that's still anonymous. It still goes through the NASA system before any information is transferred to the FAA.
So let's talk a little bit more granular about that report. So what information should I put in the report?
So the report's very generic, or at least the form is very generic. It includes a range of information, and not all of it's going to be applicable to every flight. So you don't feel like you have to fill out every box. You want to fill out the boxes that are most appropriate. If this is maybe a mistake that occurred while taxiing, then I don't necessarily need a cruise altitude. If this was something that happened airborne, then yes, I'm going to want to include the altitude that we were at and other pertinent information. So it's a lengthy form. Don't feel like you have to fill out everything, but make sure you put in anything that would be helpful. And also include a description. The descriptions, you want to be factual. You don't want to be defensive, and you don't need to provide explanations for why things happened. Just a factual report of this is the event that occurred, and then move on to the next box.
So this is something that you just want to give the facts, and because maybe possibly wind up causing yourself a violation if you say too much. Possibly, I don't know.
Right. If there's anything intentional, another condition of this program is that it does not provide protection if the FAA feels that you were not proficient or competent as a pilot. So in other words, let's say you run off a runway, you fill out this report, the FAA comes to you, you give them the serial number, say, here's the report, and they go, okay, well, that's great, and you discuss here how you forgot how to do a crosswind landing, and then you ran off a runway. Okay, that's going to be an issue. So too much information is too much. So if you're filling out that form, just be very factual. Landed on the runway, aircraft slid off the runway, or I landed on this runway and I turned off that taxiway, and then the controller said that was the wrong taxiway. And that's all you have to put into that. There's no need to be defensive on these. These are factual. Making arguments and excuses will come later when we do the FAA portion if we have to do that.
Hopefully we won't have to get to that point, but sometimes they do. Is there anything on this report we absolutely shouldn't include? Is there any advice you have there?
Right. So you want to minimize identifying information. So things like if it requests your tail number, you can put that in the box because they'll remove that later. But when you're in the narrative, you want to minimize things like your tail number. Obviously, don't include the names of the pilots, things like that. So if a box asks for something, go ahead and fill it in. But when you're in the narrative, make sure that you're specific enough they understand the issue, but not so specific that the FAA could find your flight later. They're generally not going to go on a witch hunt like that, but I also don't want to give them that opportunity. So I'm just going to be somewhat generic on how I put that in.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. And by the way, if you're watching right now or listening, you can go down the show notes and click on all those forums if you want to learn a little something about the FAA's program, the NASA reporting forum. There's actually some really good information, some great reports that they put out, great newsletters and stuff like that. So I really highly recommend that. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell if you want to get notified of other videos like this one. When we're talking to an attorney and we're talking with Chris Pezalla of Strumer Law, one of the things that we might want to ask, since we have an attorney with us, is do I need an attorney or should I get an attorney before I actually file this report?
So that's a good question, and we do occasionally get calls from folks. It's going to be up to each pilot to determine if they want to reach out for help. In general, it's better to err on the side of conferring with an attorney. A lot of aviation attorneys like myself do a free consultation. So if I get a call and it takes 10, 15 minutes, we don't normally bill for that. Things that are specifically going to need an attorney, anything involving an accident, damaged aircraft, that you'd want to get an attorney. Probably anything involving a runway incursion, those can be pretty serious these days. And if you get a letter of investigation, then yes, you'd certainly want to talk to an attorney about those. And if you're conducting something illegal, I can recommend some criminal attorneys, but generally speaking, don't file those into the reports. So, if it's just an airspace and you bumped into it, that probably doesn't call for an attorney. But anything you get a letter for or anything involving an accident, you definitely want to get some help.
In general, do you think that by filing the safety report that the FAA or investigators might be a little more lenient, possibly?
That has generally been my experience. The program says that it provides immunity, but then it provides a handful of exceptions too. So I always say it's not 100%. The FAA doesn't want to go on this witch hunt all the time. It takes a lot of resources to drag people into court and to take away certificates. They don't want to do it. They just want to improve safety. They want to make sure the planes are where they're supposed to be and that everybody's following the regulations. And so if you're making that effort to do what you're supposed to do, this program and the FAA in general are there to help you.
They really are. And before we conclude here, I do want to make one comment. If you're interested in learning more about the different accidents, incidents that have happened, there's this really cool newsletter I'd highly recommend. It's called Callback. It's the NASA Aviation Safety Reporting System newsletter, basically. Really good information. And one of the most important things we can do is learn from other people's mistakes. You can go on their website, links below. It'll actually be real simple. You sign up for the newsletter. Love using them for conversations with students and friends, and kind of those what ifs, what would I have done in that situation. Really, really great information we can glean from that. Well, this has been great having you on here, Chris. But one thing I want to do is kind of quickly go through this, the NASA Aviation Safety Reporting System, where they can find it, and what they can do with it. Just a quick overview again.
Okay, so yes, again, it's going to be on its own website. Carl, I believe you'll provide a link to that.
I will.
And you go there, it'll provide all the information. There's an advisory circular that also provides about 5 pages of detail on the program. It also tells you when it applies and when it doesn't. So that's going to be a good place to go for that. I'd also like to point out, in addition to the callback letter, the database, once the reports are de-identified, they're in a database. It's a public database. So if you're a student or a flight school and you're doing research, this is a great place to go. When I got bored and wrote that entire book on holding patterns, I actually went into the database to find occurrences involving holding patterns, because I wanted to see what kinds of mistakes do we see. And what was interesting is that most of the mistakes we saw were professional pilots, airline or charter, who were misprogramming the FMS. That seemed to be the #1 cause of reports related to holding patterns. So that was really interesting, and that guided part of the work that I did with the book. So if you're doing any kind of research, that's a great way to go. Or if you're seeing an issue at your local airport, you can see if other people are having that issue. Just remember, it is going to be delayed a couple of weeks or a few months while they process that report.
If I might add to that too, I always talk about callback, and I forgot to mention there's other really cool reports they have. The database, like you said, I'm glad you mentioned that. They have these other, like they call it direct lines, some really cool issues that have come up with operators, airline operators, that type of thing, operational issue bulletins. They have research papers. They got these special studies. They got all sorts of really cool stuff. So I highly recommend going out there to the Aviation Safety Reporting System and learn from all those different reports. They're very well put together and well researched and very, very thorough. So, besides the database, the newsletter, it's one of my favorite places to go for information. I love learning from what other people have done in the past. So I'll have a link in the show notes to that. But anyway, again, Chris, they can find this information online. They should file it, and don't be afraid of filing, because there's probably not going to be much as far as punitive damage. But I like, in your words, just a quick summary, what we've gone over, and what they can do if they need further help.
Right. So the Air Safety Reporting System is here to help. If you're not sure, take a look at the advisory circular, see if that's something you should include. You do have 10 days, so don't feel like you have to file it right now. A lot of times when there's a motion, you don't want to file it at that moment. You want to take the time to think through what you want to say. If you're not comfortable filling out the report, or it's a more significant incident, feel free to contact an attorney, get some advice before you fill out those reports, especially if it's been an accident. And then once you've filled out that report, make sure you hold on to that registration number, because that is how you're going to find it again, because your name is not going to be on that report. Or if it goes in the form, it's not going to be very long, because they're going to remove that. So make sure you hold on to that number.
Great advice, Chris. Hey, thanks for coming again. Chris Pezalla with Strumer Law. You can find out more about what they do as far as aviation law at strumerlaw.com. We can put that up in the show notes. You'll see it on the screen right now. But always great information. Chris, I can't wait to have you back on again. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you. Certainly, Carl.
If you're listening right now and you're interested in more information about everything we talked about, it's down in the show notes. They're all clickable links. I highly recommend checking out all those reports we talked about. Don't be afraid of filing a report if you need to. Go back, watch this video, maybe get some more information. Do me a favor, subscribe and click on the bell so you get notified as to other videos that are coming out. Also, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, depending on whether you like it or not, so that we can determine what other videos would be more helpful for you. you. Well, I really appreciate your listening today. And do me a favor, after we're done with this, don't stop. Do something after this video to keep moving forward in your aviation life. It might be actually researching some of the things that are down in the show notes here. I really highly recommend it. We'll talk to you next episode. Safe flying out there.